Let us make it to a sixth show. Can you believe it? Welcome into the latest Spring Blake college football show. I'm Spring Blake. It's a college football show. If this is your first time here, first off, thank you for joining. Make sure while you're here, leave a like, leave a subscribe, share it, interact, do everything that you can to support this show. I promise the support you give, I give tenfold in content. If you're coming back, if you've been here since day one, which is really only a week and 5 days ago, thank you for coming back. Make sure, are you subscribed? Have you liked the channel? Are you interacting? If not, I'll give you a quick 5 seconds here. I think that was 5 seconds. Hopefully you've done it by then. Thank you for coming back. Not only can you support this show on, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you can also head to social media, take to Twitter, take to TikTok. My handle is @SpringBlakeCFB. Interact with me there. If you are a fan of SEC football or Texas A&M football, you can find my writing at the Gig'em Gazette. That is a fan-sided publication. I do some work there for this upcoming regular season. So, obviously today, as you've seen in the title, we've got our ACC tiers and predictions for the upcoming season. We did the SEC on Monday. Terrible show. Hand up. We rebounded in a big way with a great Big Ten preview and tier breakdown on Wednesday. We'll try and make this one just as good as that. And then next Tuesday, we'll finish off our conference tiers with the Big 12. So I don't really have much more outside of that before just getting into things. Again, just like we did in the last 2 episodes, I'm going to bat with ChatGPT. 3 win totals in each conference. I've already given out the ones, obviously, for the SEC and Big Ten. We'll hit the 3 that each of us have taken. I feel weird calling ChatGPT part of us. I'll let you know what it chose, what I chose. We're going to see who the best ball knower is by the end of this season. So, the tiers that we have here are national title contenders, conference title contenders / playoff caliber teams, sneaky sleeper teams in the third, and then bowl-bound teams and teams with work at the end, which we kind of just brush through a little bit and touch on what I think might be important. So let's just rip it off, get right into things here in the ACC. We all know who the one national title contender in this conference is, and that is none other than Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers. Now, just like with a lot of other teams in these last 2 episodes, we did detailed breakdowns of these teams during my Top 16 show, my Sweet 16. It was episode 2 if you want to go back and give that a listen, if you want the full analysis. But here's kind of the brief recap. One of the best quarterbacks in the nation, maybe the most talented quarterback in the nation, the second most talented receiving room, 5 really talented and experienced players along the offensive line, one of the top 3 defensive lines in the sport, and a top 5 secondary to go along with that, with one of my favorite cornerback tandems in the nation. All that, plus a really strong coaching staff. I loved their ability to poach Tom Allen away from Penn State. He'll be a great defensive coordinator here. A guy really, tasked with fixing the run defense. If that was one thing that we were looking for, okay, what do we need better out of Clemson? I think improvement from the linebacker play, the defensive tackles in the run game specifically. So hopefully Tom Allen's addition and maybe the work he does with this team helps Clemson in that area. And then on offense, they lose Phil Maffa, who was a really talented runner of the football. You need to find the next bell cow back. I'm sure they've got it there. We just don't know who it is yet. But that's really all I question about with Clemson. Stop the run, run the football. This is the best team in the ACC. It's one of the 3 to 5 best teams in the entire nation. Will contend for, will be one of those final teams there in the national landscape. And then within the SEC, the schedule isn't easy. They have 2 really tough non-conference games against SEC teams, that being LSU to kick off the year, South Carolina to finish out the year. And they also have road trips to tough environments, Georgia Tech and Louisville on the schedule. But again, as I said, there's a talent discrepancy between this program and the rest of the ACC, so I don't foreshadow too many crazy results for the Tigers this upcoming season. And ChatGPT is right with me because they have a bold one here. They took Clemson's team total of over 10.5 at plus 120 odds. Now, that, of course, obviously comes down to just slipping up once. And there's not too many chances for them to. If they can beat LSU in week 1, I probably feel pretty good about that hitting, but 10.5 is just a tough number for me to take, so ChatGPT can have that all they want. So that's the clear and obvious. Clemson, number 1, the only national title contender in the ACC. This is where things get really fun in this conference. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in that playoff contender / conference title contender tier. Lot of different outcomes. Who will compete with the Tigers for a conference title? How many teams could potentially sneak their way not into this conversation but the playoffs? This is the group that is most intriguing in the conference, and there's so many different chaotic outcomes, but the one I kept being drawn to was having the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets securing the 2nd seed and making it to the ACC conference title game. Huge year for Brent Key in 2025. This team has consistently been frisky and a sleeper team that always pulls off an upset or two on the schedule, and I think everything has slowly been building toward this 2025 campaign. They returned 7 starters on defense. Haynes King at quarterback. Jamal Haynes, the running back, will lead the attack on offense. It's a really strong quarterback-running back duo. The conference could be total chaos when it's all said and done, kind of like it was last year at times. But I do like that Georgia Tech doesn't have to play Miami. They don't have to play Florida. They don't have to play SMU. And they don't have to play Louisville. 4 teams we're going to talk about very soon. With a lot to like on the roster and a lighter schedule than a lot of these other teams I have in this 2nd tier, I feel strongly about the Yellow Jackets taking that next jump, removing just we're this frisky team that pulls off an upset. No, we are going to be that from start to finish in the year. My 2nd place team in the ACC and the team I have playing against Clemson for a conference title by the end of the year. And if you think that's hot, of course I'm going to give you the team total here. This number is sitting at 7.5, and not only is it just 7.5, it's at plus 164. Obviously, if I think this team can finish 2nd in the conference, I believe they are capable of an 8 or 9 win season. So we're going to smash that as the first Spring Blake total in the ACC.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So moving on down the line, it was a really tough choice leaving the Miami Hurricanes outside of the ACC title game following their 10-win season in 2024, because I still really think this is a talented team and one capable of wiggling its way into the playoff conference title conversation. We said it before, this team is built beautifully from the inside out. Mario Cristobal, former offensive lineman, you can clearly tell where he puts his emphasis on roster construction. One of the better offensive lines in football, one of the stronger defensive lines in the conference. I would say if it wasn't for the Clemsons of the world in this ACC, we'd be oohing and aahing about Miami having the best trench play in the entire conference. What it came down to, and why I left Miami outside of the conference title game in the ACC, is I'm just scared to put my faith in Carson Beck after seeing what Cam Ward had to do to keep this team afloat throughout the 2024 season. Now, maybe he doesn't need to do as much. They bring in Corey Heatherman to be the new defensive coordinator, former Duke, go Dukes, and the group should take a jump after what was really, a sloppy 2024 season. But it's also not like Miami is oozing with talent at the wide receiver or running back positions like they were last year. They lost a ton of great guys at those roles as well, too. So it's not just the fact that you lose Cam Ward. The offense as a whole is going to be figuring it out early on in the season. The out-of-conference schedule is tough. They start the season with Notre Dame in week 1 and have Florida just a few weeks after that. So that's not really an opportunity to get some solid momentum going if you're Carson Beck. They also have to play at Florida State and at SMU. They host a really talented Louisville Cardinal team. I think there's just too many spots on the schedule here for them to slip up. And kind of like we saw last year, I think Carson Beck, what we saw out of Carson Beck last year and what we saw out of Miami last year is just 1 or 2 too many games where they slip up and they're not going to be the most consistent football team we see all season. That's why I landed on the Hurricane as my number 3 team in the ACC. So up next, I've got a few sexy picks coming, finishing out this 2nd tier in the ACC. Let me introduce to you my 4th place team in the conference, one that I think is certainly in the mix for a conference title appearance. And if you're in that, just like we saw with SMU last year, you have a shot at making the college football playoffs. It is Jeff Brohm's Louisville Cardinal. This team has all the makings of a force to be reckoned with by season end. There's a lot of new on this team, but good new at that. I loved bringing in Miller Moss to be the quarterback for this offense. I think he gets a bad rap for what was a tough situation at USC last year. He'll also have a really awesome ground game to rely on. Isaac Brown and Duke Watson are the tandem that will just kind of run this offense and kind of open a lot of things up for Miller Moss in this passing game. And as I've said every time I get the chance to, Jeff Brohm plus quarterbacks, it just works. I think he's going to be I think Miller Moss is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC this year. I mean, if outside of Cade Klubnik, I'm running through the list right now. I think he can be more productive than Carson Beck. Haynes King is definitely a different type of quarterback. I'm going to say Miller Moss, second best quarterback in the ACC this season. They have a really good offensive line, 200-plus starts under their belts. On defense, they did lose a few guys in the secondary to the NFL, but have one of the better linebacker tandems in the country and a lot of new transfers along the defensive line to hopefully get to the quarterback. Now, as I said, this team will ride some nice momentum into the tougher parts of their schedule, which is why I like them to finish as high as fourth in the ACC. They've got a nice path to be 5-0 by the middle of October. It does get tough after that because they have games against Miami, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and SMU to close out the year. That's a lot. I think they can slip up once or twice in that stretch and eventually keep them out of an ACC title game. Still, really solid program in the third year under Jeff Brohm, and I love where things are headed for Louisville in terms of just being, they're not yet at that, like, we're in the top of the conference, but they're right in that second tier of, like, no, you're not going to catch us slipping up one season or another. I think this is something that's humming in a really positive direction for Louisville. And yeah, so what? We've got two more teams. God, we're kind of buzzing on through this, aren't we? God, ACC preview is going to be a quick one. And hey, a Friday episode. This is what I love. Last Friday's episode, 35 minutes, and we got you out for the weekend. We're already on my fifth team. We're maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more into this show, and we're going to get you out for another great weekend. My number 5 team, this next team, I went sexy with Louisville. We're going to go sexy again, and kind of in a really gross way. Finding itself as the 5th place team in the ACC standings, despite being fresh off a 2-10 campaign. You all know the team. It's the Florida State Seminoles. Simply put, this is going to be one of the biggest rebound teams in the entire country this season. Really strong coordinator additions. Gus Malzahn, a step down from UCF to be the OC at Florida State. Tony White is the new defensive coordinator. Previous stops at Nebraska and Syracuse. You're going to get better production from every position group because it couldn't have been worse last year. Thomas Castellanos is the guy in at quarterback. They have a very deep and talented wide receiver room as well. Gus Malzahn, one of the better run game designers in the sport. Is that the way to say that? Run game designers, run game planners. I don't know the right way to say that, but anywho, expect a big season out of Roydell Williams as he returns after missing, I think, 8 games in 2024. Previous Alabama transfer, full healthy season. Gus Malzahn is his offensive coordinator. I think this is going to be a really strong rush attack here for the Seminoles. I expect the same type of growth on defense. Tony White, 4 straight seasons of putting out top 25 defenses at Syracuse and Nebraska, as I previously mentioned. Biggest indicator here for Florida State's improvement is turnover luck. We talked about this in previous episodes. If you were really drastic one way or the other, it typically regresses to the mean and either means that you're going to take a step back or a step forward. The Seminoles had one of the worst turnover margins in the nation, -16 last year. That won't carry over year to year, even if it's half as good. You're going to get a much better, a much more stable season out of Florida State here. Now, the reason why I can't have them jump from 2-10 to conference title, contender or conference champion is because of the schedule. You can be as improved as you want in this sport, but when you've got games against Alabama, Miami, Clemson, and Florida, those are real quick. 4 teams that were all in my top 16, 3 that were in my top 10, 2 of my top 5 teams. There's too many momentum killers spotted throughout this roster to be squeaky clean everywhere else. So I think it's going to be a really nice bounce back year for the Seminoles. It'll get Mike Norvell off of the hot seat, even though his buyout he was never going to be on the hot seat in the first place. But it'll be back to that, okay, Florida State actually just had a really unlucky season. They're in a perfectly fine spot moving forward. Now, we got our double bet here because ChatGPT, I knew I was going to screw this up. I can't say ChatGPT. They're not buying the Seminoles. They've got under 7.5 wins. The juice on this is disgusting. Minus 205. That's a crazy number. They shouldn't be allowed to take that. But what that means for me, your boys taking the over 7.5. Plus 164. ChatGPT and I on very opposite ends of the spectrum here with the Seminoles. I have them 5th in the ACC for this season. And that leaves one final team in my conference title playoff contender tier in the ACC, and it is last year's runner-up in the conference, the SMU Mustangs. Last year was an awesome introduction to the conference. 10 regular season wins, just on the cusp of winning the ACC title against Clemson, went down to the wire, and then making it into the first ever 12-team playoffs, and I believe having a lead over Penn State at a certain point. I forget how that game went exactly. I know it didn't end as pretty, but there was a point where you were like, oh, dang, SMU's in this thing. For me, though, heading into 2025, it just feels like a slight retool for whatever the next SMU wave is going to look like. They replaced 14 starters across the board, their best running back, their best wide receiver, 9 starters along the defensive unit, which you never love to see. Kevin Jennings is a really talented quarterback. I'm curious in this next season if he's ready to make that jump and be like, I'm a top 8 to 10 guy in the sport. He does have a great offensive line to play behind. He's obviously a fantastic athlete, and they hit the portal hard at the playmaking positions. So maybe this is an opportunity for him to prove me wrong twice. Maybe he takes that next step and is a top 8 quarterback in the sport. And maybe SMU is that 3rd or 4th team in the conference. But for me, I ended up putting them down because of the turnover on the roster. And the schedule is a mixed bag, I would say. They draw some of the worst teams in the ACC, which the worst teams in the ACC are bad. But they also have to play Clemson, Miami, and Louisville, 3 teams we've already discussed. They have 2 tricky non-conference games as well, taking on TCU and Baylor from the Big 12. Baylor is thought about to be in the mix for being one of the best teams in that conference, and TCU definitely, we haven't talked about them yet. They're definitely not, they're not in the bottom. They're a little bit closer to the top than I would say bottom there. So 2 really tough games in that non-conference schedule as well. They'll hang around, but I think eventually a couple of slip-ups here, they'll fall to the bottom of my conference title contender tier in the ACC. And, man, ChatGPT really has it out for me on this show. Have they already given out their other 2 bets? So they're on Clemson over 10.5, which honestly I didn't hate. They are on the Florida State under 7.5, which I do hate. They are on SMU over 8.5 wins. That's it, minus 122 odds. Taking a 9-win season out of SMU, which means they have to think. So they could lose to Clemson, Miami, and Louisville and still win, but then they have to be clean the rest of the way. All right, well, crazier things have happened, but that'll be ChatGPT's 3 bets for the ACC, and that ties a bow on our second tier of this conference.
My name's Blake.
All right, we've got a real fun conversation here at number 7 in the ACC, the first team in my sleeper, sneaky category type team. For all the reasons we've discussed this program the last few months, I just can't wait to just get them out on a football field and we can judge them based on what they look like out there. And I know for damn sure their head coach agrees on that as well. My 7th team in the ACC, the first team in the sleeper category, it is Bill Belichick's North Carolina Tar Heels. That still sounds really weird. Look, man, all I can tell you is it's going to be better. They've got strong coordinators working under Bill. He's obviously the greatest coach in the history of this sport, and the entire team is new. And you could look at that and say, like, man, how are you going to put all those pieces together? You could also look at that and say, like, man, North Carolina was really, really bad at points last year. JMU hung a 70 burger on them. I think they bring back just 4 starters from last season. I think it's kind of one of those situations where it's a good thing. To me, this year at North Carolina is all about player development and a schedule that allows for it. Bill Belichick is one of the best to ever develop talent in this sport and always puts out teams that have a really high floor. Do they have the highest ceiling in the world? Are they like the Kansas Cities? You know, it was New England at its peak. I guess they had a couple years there, but the 2010s, it was all about really solid defense, doing your job, letting the other team make mistakes. That's what we're going to get here in this first season at North Carolina. Do I think they're going to light it up offensively? No, but I think they'll find a way to just win a lot of really gritty games. And the schedule kind of plays in for them to build up some momentum for the end of the season. You know, TCU, we just talked about with SMU, it's not the easiest game in the world, and that's how they start their season. But they've got 3 nice tune-up games after that to kind of build some momentum and get the ball rolling. They'll lose to Clemson. I'm not going to sit here and say that they are this team that's going to go in and upset one of the top 5 teams in the nation. But after that, there's not a whole lot to be worried about on the schedule. They play Cal, Virginia, Syracuse, Stanford, Wake Forest, Duke, and NC State. I haven't mentioned any of those teams yet. Those are teams that I think are below North Carolina. So if they can get those wins, and maybe they can steal a win against TCU, or God forbid they play, Clemson close, this is going to be a team that racks up some wins here. So I am in on North Carolina. I hope it's not one of those trendy, clickbaity things where we all look like idiots a few months down the road, but I love Bill. I think it's going to work at the collegiate level. I think he'll get buy-in from that roster, and all it will take is a few good wins early in the season to really get some momentum building for Chapel Bill in what will be a solid first season here at North Carolina. All right, so up next at number 8, this is a team that had really high expectations heading into 2024 and fell pretty short of them. But that's kind of why I like Virginia Tech this year as a sleeper in the conference and my 8th place team in the ACC. Really fun player at quarterback, Kyron Drones. One of my favorite players in the sport to watch. Is a really fun athlete. The only thing I don't love about him this season is there's just so much new around him. New play caller, 4 new starters on the offensive line. They lost 4 of their top receivers, and I believe they also lost their top running back from a season ago. So everything working around him is new. And the schedule kind of smacks Virginia Tech in the face. You start the season with 2 SEC games. Now it's South Carolina and Vanderbilt. If you heard me talk about them on Monday's episode, I do have them a little bit lower, but being a lower team in the SEC does not mean that you're just this cakewalk. So 2 tough games to start off the year, and then they also play 4 of my top 5 teams in the conference with games against Georgia Tech, Louisville, Florida State, and Miami all on that schedule. This is one of those situations where it feels like this is Brent Pry's best group on paper as he enters his 4th season with the Hokies. And I think they're a group that's capable of spoiling a season. If Kyron Drones just has this crazy him game, he can knock off one of those teams that I mentioned, whether it be a Louisville or a Florida State or a Georgia Tech. They'll be that type of frisky, but I just don't think there's enough meat on the bone to put them in that tier above, which is why they finish as my 8th team in the ACC.
Blake. What?
Man, I love the idea of us being a quick Friday show and we're out. I love maybe like a little deep dives on Monday, Wednesday, something quick and sexy on Friday so we can go party. All right, number 9 in the ACC. I love that Manny Diaz is back as a head coach in this sport. And I've got his Blue Devils as my 9th team in the conference, smack dab in the middle of this sleeper tier of the ACC. The big get this offseason was Darian Mensah at quarterback. He comes in from Tulane. He'll be a nice addition to the offense and certainly add way more of an athletic profile to the quarterback position, way more mobile. You can use him in the ground game. I think their offensive line is better than it was a season ago. The playmakers are fine, not great, but they do bring back 7 starters along the defense, so I like the continuity in year 2. Hit the button, year 2 bump under Manny Diaz here. Now look, 9-win season last year, obviously a little bit of a step back. I don't think that that is going to be obtainable, but that's also because they had a really light schedule last season, and I think it bumps from like 75th in the country to 36th this season. They've got 2 tough non-conference games in consecutive weeks to start off the year. I think it's Illinois in week 2, Tulane in week 3. And then once they're into conference play, they have to face Clemson, Georgia Tech, and UNC, 3 teams, that we've already discussed in this episode. It's not the worst schedule I've ever seen, honestly. I was kind of surprised from the 75th to the 36th, but definitely something that keeps them out of conference title and playoff contention, and more is just a frisky, middle-of-the-pack team in the ACC.
You want to go to war, Balaki?
And we are not done yet because we've got one more team in the sleeper tier to finish things off. It's the Pitt Panthers. And no matter how good or bad the Pitt Panthers are, I just like the way it sounds. Pitt Panthers. They're always just a frisky team, no matter how good or bad they are. I've got them here as my 10th team in the conference. Pat Narduzzi always has a really aggressive and fun defensive line. That'll be the case yet again in 2025. They returned 7 starters on that side of the football from a group that was really impressive during stretches of the 2024 season. It wasn't solid throughout the year, but it had some really nice peaks, and they'll look to build upon that in 2025. At quarterback, Eli Holston is back. He was off to a fantastic start in 2024 before getting banged up. If he's healthy for a full season, this offense should be one of the better ones in this conference, and it'll lean on the talents of Desmond Reed in the backfield. That's a really good quarterback-running back duo. There was another team we talked about having one of those. It was Georgia Tech. A really good duo there, and something that will keep what should be a pretty balanced offense at Pitt. The biggest reason I have them at the bottom of this tier, and again, there's not a whole lot that separates this pack in the ACC, but the reason I have them below the likes of like Duke and North Carolina and those other teams is because of the schedule. Notre Dame is in the non-conference, which is never great, and you also have games against Louisville, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Miami. They'll definitely steal one of those. I'm not sure which one. They'll definitely hurt someone's season on that schedule. I'm not sure how many more beyond that one, which is why I've got them down as my 10th team in the conference, and the final one that we have in the sleeper tier of the ACC. All right, so just to rattle off my bowl-bound teams in the ACC, and we'll hit on one team just for like a quick nugget. 11th, I had the North Carolina State Wolfpack. 12th, I had the Syracuse Orange. We spent some time talking about Syracuse taking a step back this year. Go listen to that from, I believe, last Friday's episode. And then at 13, I have the Boston College Eagles. Bill O'Brien, obviously entering his second year as the head coach here. This is another one of those situations where a lot of starters back. You think the team is going to take the next step, but the schedule just doesn't work in their favor for it. They've faced Clemson, Notre Dame, Louisville, SMU, and Georgia Tech. It's not going to be a massive year 2 bump when you have to face that many of the conference's best teams. So, and that doesn't mention Notre Dame. God, I saw Notre Dame on there, and I always just fit them in with the ACC because they do this dumb schedule thing. Clemson, Louisville, SMU, and Georgia Tech, all teams that I have in that second tier of the conference. Also Notre Dame in the non-con. Better team, return a lot of players, but I don't see it taking the leap to anything beyond being a bowl team. And then we also had one more bowl team before I forget to mention. The Virginia Cavaliers were my 14th team in the ACC. As I mentioned, the bad in this conference is really bad. My final 3 teams, the teams with work to do, the Stanford Cardinals at 15, the California Bears at 16, and the Wake Forest Demon Deacons closing it out as my worst team in the conference. Now, the only one we're going to touch on in this group is Stanford. It's a new era for the Cardinals, but it's an era that is near and dear to my heart as a Colts fan. General manager Andrew Luck, interim head coach Frank Reich. They are leading the charge after Troy Taylor was dismissed in the offseason. They bring a lot of starters back on both sides of the ball. I like this coaching staff, obviously, and I think a fresh approach will keep things away from being the worst team in the conference. But as much as I'd love to say this new era will bring them back to the glory days of the mid-2010s, plenty of work to do here, which is why I landed on them as 15th in the conference. That being said, the reason I wanted to mention them is we're getting gritty. We are getting so gritty on this show. My third and final team total in the ACC. We are taking over 3.5 wins for the Stanford Cardinals. I just need 4. I just need 4, baby. Andrew Luck, Frank Reich gave me some of my better days as a Colts fan in the post-Manning era, obviously. And they will do it for me here. They will get to 4 wins for Stanford this season. So that'll wrap up another short Friday episode here at the Spring Blake College Football Show. Thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for allowing me an extra day until next Tuesday to get this Big 12 preview out. We'll hit that. We'll hit Wednesday with some playoff talk, conference title talk, anything else we need to wrap a bow on before the start of the season. And then we're in it, man. We made it. We survived it. We're now back. Football is back. And I am so excited to go through this 2025 season with you all. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great weekend. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'll talk to you next week. Peace.